The lecture hall was quiet as Instructor Vektal pointed his long, scaled finger at the holographic display. A massive ship rotated slowly in the blue light, its gray hull covered in weapons and armor plates. Young cadets from a dozen different species watched with curious eyes. "This," Vektal said with a slight hiss in his voice, "is the human warship called Indomitable. It was built 80 years ago and has never fired a single shot in combat." Some of the cadets laughed. A few whispered to each other. Vektal continued, "The humans spent billions of credits building this ship. They filled it with weapons that nobody has ever seen used. They keep 4,000 crew members aboard, training every single day for a war that never comes. And they call it their pride." More laughter rippled through the room. Vektal allowed himself a thin smile. The humans were good people, he thought, but they were stuck in the past. The galaxy had been at peace for 300 years. There was no need for such a monster of a ship. Far across the galaxy, on that very ship, Captain Day stood on the bridge with his hands behind his back. He was 53 years old, with gray touching his dark hair at the temples. His uniform was crisp and clean. His face showed no emotion as he watched his crew work at their stations. "Status report," he said quietly. Commander Hana looked up from her tactical display. She was younger than the captain, sharp-eyed and quick-minded. "All systems normal, Captain. Weapons drill completed with 98% efficiency. Make it 100% next time," Day said. Hana nodded. She sometimes wondered if all this training was necessary. They had been drilling for years, and nothing ever happened. The galaxy was peaceful, but she would never say such things out loud. Captain Day took their duty seriously, and so she did too. Down in the weapons bay, Lieutenant Tay was supervising his gun crews. He was young, only 28, but he knew every weapon system on the ship better than anyone else. He watched as his teams loaded practice rounds into the massive railguns that lined the ship's sides. "Faster," he called out. "In a real fight, the enemy won't wait for you to take your time." The crew members moved quicker, their hands flying over controls and loading mechanisms. Tay nodded with approval. These weapons had never been fired at an enemy. But when that day came, they would be ready. Deep in the ship's engineering section, Chief Engineer Bora wiped sweat from her forehead. The reactor room was always hot, always loud with the hum of massive power generators. She checked her displays for the 100th time that day, making sure every system was running perfectly. "Chief, why do we keep these old experimental reactors?" asked one of her junior engineers. "The new coalition ships have much better power systems." Bora gave him a hard look. "Because when these reactors run at full power, we can output 3 times what those fancy coalition ships can manage. Never question human engineering. Boy, we build things to last and to work when everything else fails." The young engineer nodded quickly and went back to his work. Bora allowed herself a small smile. She was proud of this ship, even if the rest of the galaxy thought it was a waste. On Earth, in the Coalition Council building, Admiral Ko sat in a meeting with representatives from dozens of alien species. They were discussing military budgets. Most species wanted to reduce their defense spending. Peace was profitable, after all. "The human delegation wishes to maintain current military readiness levels," Ko said firmly. "We believe preparedness is essential." A bird-like ambassador from the Sith species chirped with amusement. "Admiral, humanity has 12 dreadnoughts that cost more to maintain than some species' entire fleets. For what purpose? There are no threats to the coalition." Ko's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "History teaches us that peace is temporary. We would rather have ships we never use than need ships we never built." The council moved on to other business. Ko sat back in his chair, frustrated. Nobody understood. Nobody remembered what it was like to face real danger. They had all grown soft. But far away, in the dark spaces between stars where no coalition ships patrolled, something was moving. Ships, thousands of them. They had been hiding for 500 years, building and growing stronger in the blackness of space. They were called the Vreth Dominion, and they remembered the galaxy that had driven them away centuries ago. Now they were coming back. The first warnings came from long-range sensor stations at the edge of Coalition space. Technicians stared at their screens in confusion. The readings showed impossible things. Ships, hundreds, maybe thousands, all moving toward Coalition territory. "This must be a malfunction," one technician said. "There's nothing out there. There hasn't been anything out there for centuries." But the readings didn't change. The signals got stronger. Something was coming. And it was big. Emergency messages flashed through the quantum communication network. Within hours, every Coalition world knew the news. An unknown fleet was approaching. It was massive. It was hostile. Panic spread like fire. The Coalition military had peacekeeping ships, fast scouts, and elegant cruisers built for patrol duty. They were not built for war. Most member species had reduced their military forces to almost nothing over the years. The Coalition Council met in emergency session. Voices shouted over each other in a dozen languages. What should they do? Who would defend them? How could they fight an enemy fleet that outnumbered all their forces combined? Admiral Ko stood and raised his voice above the chaos. Earth's fleet is ready to assist. We can have ships at the border in 48 hours. The human ships? Someone asked. But they're so old. So primitive. Ko's eyes flashed with anger. Our ships are ready for war. Can you say the same? The council had no answer to that. On the Indomitable, Captain Day received the emergency broadcast. He read it twice, his face still showing no emotion. Then he turned to Commander Hana. Sound general quarters. All hands to battle stations. Plot a course for the border zones. 2. Hana's eyes widened. Sir, we haven't received orders yet. The official fleet is assembling. The official fleet won't get there in time, Day interrupted. By the time they arrive, the outer colonies will be destroyed. We're going now. But Captain, we could be court-martialed for unauthorized action. Day looked at her steadily. Then I'll be court-martialed. But those people will still be alive. Now give the order. Hana hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. The alert klaxons began to wail throughout the ship. Crew members ran to their stations. After 80 years of waiting, the Indomitable was finally going to war. In the weapons bay, Lieutenant Tay heard the alert and felt his heart race. This was it. This was what they had trained for. He began bringing the weapon systems online, watching as indicators turned from yellow to green. The railguns hummed with power. The missile pods armed themselves. The massive main cannon along the ship's spine began charging. Chief Engineer Bora watched her power readings climb as the ship prepared for combat. The experimental reactors that had sat dormant for so long began pushing toward full capacity. Around her, her engineering teams worked with practiced precision, bringing every system online. All reactors at 80% and climbing, she reported to the bridge. We'll be at full power in 30 minutes. The Indomitable began to move, pulling away from its patrol route and accelerating toward the edge of Coalition space. It was alone. No other human ships could reach the battle zone in time. The rest of the galaxy thought it was a relic, a waste of resources. A ship that represented humanity's inability to let go of the past. They were about to learn the truth. Captain Day stood on his bridge and watched the stars streak past as they jumped to faster-than-light speed. Somewhere ahead, an enemy was coming. Somewhere ahead, people needed defending. And somewhere ahead, a legend was about to be tested. Time to destination? He asked. 18 hours at maximum speed, Hana reported. Day nodded. Good. That gives us time to prepare. This ship has been waiting for 80 years. Let's make sure we're ready. The Indomitable raced through space, carrying 4,000 human crew members toward the largest battle the galaxy had seen in 3 centuries. Behind them, Earth's other warships began to mobilize, but they would arrive days too late. Everything depended on one ship, one crew, one captain, who refused to let legends remain untested. The war had begun. The Indomitable cut through space like a blade through water. Inside the ship, every crew member worked with focused intensity. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. And now, it was real. Captain Day walked through the corridors, observing his crew. In the medical bay, Dr. Yoon was organizing supplies and preparing beds for wounded. Her face was calm, but her hands moved quickly, efficiently. She had studied battlefield medicine for 20 years without ever treating a combat injury. Soon, that would change. "Doctor," Day said, stopping at the entrance to the bay. "Are you ready?" Yoon looked up and nodded. "As ready as I can be, Captain. I've run 1,000 simulations, but simulations don't bleed." "No," Day agreed. "They don't." He continued his rounds. In the weapons bay, Lieutenant Tay was running final checks on every system. The young officer looked up as the captain approached. "All weapons ready, sir," Tay reported. "Railguns, missiles, and the main cannon. Everything is charged and waiting." Day studied the massive guns that filled the bay. "Have you ever wondered if we're wrong, Lieutenant? If all this preparation was unnecessary?" Tay considered the question carefully. "Every day, sir. But I'd rather be wrong and prepared than right and helpless." A thin smile crossed Day's face. "Good answer. Carry on." On the bridge, Commander Hana was studying tactical displays of the battle zone ahead. What she saw made her stomach tighten. The coalition fleet was already engaged with the enemy, and the numbers were terrible. "Captain on the bridge," she announced as Day returned. "Report," he said, settling into his command chair. "Long-range sensors are picking up the battle. Sir, it's bad. The coalition has about 40 ships. And from what I'm seeing, our ships are losing badly." Day leaned forward, studying the data. The coalition vessels were elegant things, built for peacekeeping and patrol. They used precision energy weapons and light shields. They were never designed to face an enemy that wanted to destroy them completely. "What are we facing?" he asked. "Vreth Dominion, according to the identification signals. Ancient records say they were driven out of the galaxy 500 years ago. They're using heavy armor and overwhelming firepower. Standard coalition weapons barely scratch them. And our weapons?" Hana pulled up the Indomitable's weapon specifications. "Kinetic kill weapons, railguns, missiles, and mass accelerators, designed to punch through heavy armor. Sir, if these things work as designed, we should be able to hurt them." "If they work?" Day repeated. "We've never fired them in actual combat." "No, sir. But the engineering tests were successful." Day nodded slowly. "Then we'll find out together. How long until we reach the battle?" 2 hours. Sound battle stations. All hands prepare for combat." The alert klaxons wailed again. This time, they didn't stop. All across the ship, crew members secured themselves at their stations. This was it. This was real. Far ahead, the battle was already a disaster. Admiral Sithra commanded the coalition defense fleet from her flagship. She was from the Sith species, bird-like beings with feathers and sharp eyes. She had been a military officer for 40 years, but most of that time had been spent in peaceful patrols and ceremonial duties. Now her ships were dying. "Another cruiser lost," her tactical officer reported. "That's 8 ships destroyed. 14 heavily damaged." Sithra watched her display with growing horror. The Vreth ships were monsters. Heavy, brutal, and numerous. They didn't try to disable coalition vessels. They destroyed them completely. Crews died by the hundreds with each ship that fell. "Pull back to defensive formation Beta," she ordered. "Protect the civilian transports. We need to evacuate as many people as possible." Her officers obeyed, but she could see the fear in their eyes. They all knew the truth. They couldn't win this battle. They could only die slowly or die quickly. Then her sensors officer spoke up. "Admiral, I'm detecting a new ship entering the system. It's huge." Sithra looked at her display. A single massive vessel was approaching at high speed. Her computer identified it quickly. "The human ship," she said quietly. "The Indomitable." Her tactical officer looked confused. "The museum piece? What's it doing here?" I don't know." "But they're heading straight for the combat zone." A communication came through. Captain Day's voice was calm and steady. "Coalition fleet. This is Captain Day of the KCSN Indomitable. We are responding to your distress call. Approaching combat zone at maximum speed." Sithra activated her communication panel. "Captain Day, this is Admiral Sithra. I appreciate your courage, but you should stay back. We're facing overwhelming odds. I won't have human deaths on my conscience." There was a brief pause. Then Day replied, "With respect, Admiral. We didn't ask permission. See you in the fight. Indomitable out." The communication ended. Sithra stared at her screen, not knowing whether to be impressed or horrified. The humans were flying one ship into a battle that was destroying 40 coalition vessels. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. The Vreth noticed the new arrival too. In his command ship, War Master Krell studied the sensor readings with interest. This human vessel was larger than anything else in the system. Its power readings were unusual. And it was coming directly toward his fleet. 50 ships, he ordered. "Intercept and destroy the newcomer. Show these humans what happens to those who challenge the Vreth." 50 Vreth warships broke off from the main battle and moved to intercept the Indomitable. They accelerated to attack speed, their weapons charging. The human ship continued its steady advance, making no attempt to evade or maneuver. On the Indomitable's bridge, Commander Hana watched the enemy ships approach. 50 vessels inbound. They're not bothering with formations. Just straight attack runs. Let them come, Day said. Lieutenant Tay, are your weapons ready? Let them, Tay. Lieutenant Tay. From the weapons bay, Tay's voice came through clear and steady. All systems hot and ready, Captain. Just give the word. Not yet. Let's see what our defenses can handle first. Chief Bora, how are the reactors? In engineering, Bora checked her readings. All reactors at maximum output. Shields at full strength. Armor plates locked and ready. Sir, we're as ready as we'll ever be. Good. All hands, brace for impact. The Vreth ships opened fire at maximum range. Plasma beams, kinetic slugs, and missile swarms all converged on the Indomitable. The amount of firepower would have vaporized a standard coalition cruiser instantly. The weapons hit the Indomitable's defenses in a cascade of explosions and energy discharges. The entire ship shook. Crew members gripped their stations as the deck lurched beneath them. But when the smoke cleared, the Indomitable was still there, still moving, still advancing. On her flagship, Admiral Sithra watched in shock. How is that possible? That much firepower should have destroyed them. Her tactical officer was studying the readings. Admiral, their defensive systems are nothing like ours. They're using layered armor 3 meters thick, point defense systems with incredible reaction times. And their shields don't deflect energy. They absorb it and dissipate it through heat sinks. It's not elegant, but it's incredibly effective. The Vreth ships fired again. And again. The Indomitable took everything they threw at it and kept coming. Armor plates glowed red-hot but held. Shields flickered, but regenerated. The human ship was built like a fortress. They're not even trying to dodge, Sithra whispered. They don't need to. On the Indomitable, Captain Day watched the damage reports. They were taking hits, but the ship was holding. Everything was working as designed. "Bring us to optimal firing range," he ordered. "Prepare all weapons." The ship closed the distance. The Vreth vessels continued their bombardment, but they were beginning to realize their weapons weren't working as expected. The human ship refused to die. At 2,000 kilometers, Day gave the order. "Lieutenant Tay, weapons free. Show them what we brought." In the weapons bay, Tay smiled grimly. The sides of the Indomitable erupted with light. Hundreds of railguns fired simultaneously, launching tungsten rounds at 3% the speed of light. The rounds crossed the distance in seconds. Vreth ships began to explode. The kinetic rounds punched through their heavy armor like paper. Where Coalition energy weapons had barely scratched the Vreth vessels, the human weapons tore them apart. Ship after ship broke apart in balls of fire and shrapnel. "Missile launch," Tay ordered. "Fire pattern Alpha." Thousands of missiles erupted from launch tubes along the Indomitable's hull. These weren't the smart-seeking missiles the Coalition used. These were human breachers, designed to embed themselves in enemy hulls before detonating inside the ship. The results were devastating. "Main cannon charged and ready," Tay reported. "Fire," Day said simply. The massive magnetic accelerator along the ship's spine fired once. A projectile the size of a cargo container accelerated down the length of the gun and shot out into space. It struck a Vreth capital ship dead center. The enemy ship simply vaporized. One moment it was there. The next, it was an expanding cloud of debris and plasma. Silence fell across the battlefield for just a moment. Everyone, human and alien alike, stared at what had just happened. Then the battle resumed, but everything had changed. The Indomitable waded into the enemy fleet like a nightmare made real. Its weapons fired continuously, methodically destroying Vreth ships one after another. Admiral Sithra watched and finally understood. The humans hadn't built a peacekeeping vessel. They had built a warship, a real warship, designed for one purpose: to destroy enemies completely and absolutely. "All ships," she ordered, her voice gaining strength, "rally behind the Indomitable. Support their advance. Let's show these invaders what happens when you threaten the Coalition." The surviving Coalition ships surged forward with new hope. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, they had a chance. On the Indomitable, Captain Day watched his crew work with pride. For 80 years, this ship had been called a waste, a relic, a monument to human paranoia. Now it was proving what it really was. Exactly what the galaxy needed. Exactly when they needed it. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Indomitable fought like a machine, designed for one purpose: destruction. Its railguns never stopped firing. Its missiles launched in endless waves. Every few minutes, the main cannon would fire, and another enemy capital ship would cease to exist. But the Vreth were not retreating easily. For every ship the humans destroyed, 2 more pressed forward. They hammered the Indomitable with everything they had, and slowly, inevitably, the human ship began to take real damage. "Hull breach in Section 4, Commander Hanna reported. Sealing bulkheads." Captain Day nodded calmly, though his eyes never left the tactical display. "Casualties?" Medical teams responding. Dr. Yoon reports, 8 wounded. 2 dead. 2 dead. The first casualties the Indomitable had ever suffered in combat. Day felt the weight of those deaths, but he couldn't afford to dwell on them. Not yet. "Keep firing," he ordered. In the medical bay, Dr. Yoon worked with swift precision. Wounded crew members lay on beds around her, some bleeding, some burned. She had trained for this, but training and reality were different things. Her hands remained steady as she treated a young engineer with severe burns. "You're going to be fine," she told him, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Just stay still." More wounded arrived. The medical bay began to fill. Yoon called for her assistant. Get the emergency surgery ready. We're going to need it. Down in engineering, Chief Bora was fighting her own battle. The ship's systems were taking damage faster than her teams could repair them. Coolant leaks, power fluctuations, damaged conduits. She ran from station to station, directing repairs with calm authority. Reroute power from secondary systems to shields, she ordered. And somebody patch that coolant leak before the reactor overheats. A young engineer looked panicked. Chief, the reactor temperature is climbing. If it hits critical, it won't hit critical because you're going to fix it. Bora interrupted. Now move. The engineer ran to obey. Bora allowed herself a moment to check her main display. The ship was being pushed to its limits, but it was holding together. Barely. On the bridge, Lieutenant Tay coordinated the weapons systems. His gun crews were working at maximum speed, but he could see the strain. They had been firing continuously for hours. Barrels were overheating. Ammunition stores were dropping. The weapons systems were never designed to sustain this level of combat for so long. Railgun Battery 3 is overheated, one of his crew reported. Taking it offline for emergency cooling. Compensate with batteries 2 and 4, Tay ordered. And prepare backup systems. If we lose any more guns, I want replacements ready immediately. The main cannon charged again. Tay watched the power levels climb, then gave the order. Main cannon firing. The massive gun sent another round downrange. Another enemy ship died, but Tay could see the power drain on his display. They couldn't keep using the main cannon. It drew too much energy from systems they needed for defense. Outside, the coalition fleet was rallying. Admiral Sithra had reorganized her remaining ships into a cohesive fighting force. They used the Indomitable as an anchor, supporting its advance with their precision weapons. When the human ship created breaches in enemy armor, coalition energy beams exploited those weaknesses. This is how we should have been fighting all along, Sithra's tactical officer said. Like warriors, not peacekeepers, Sithra nodded grimly. The humans had taught them something important today. Sometimes, elegance wasn't enough. Sometimes, survival required brutality, but the Vreth were learning too. War Master Krell watched from his command ship as his forces adapted to the human tactics. The Indomitable was powerful, but it was alone. And alone meant vulnerable. Focus all fire on the human ship, he ordered. Every vessel. Concentrate your attacks on their damaged sections. That ship is the key to their defense. Destroy it, and the rest will break, the Vreth fleet responded. Over 100 ships redirected their fire toward the Indomitable. The amount of firepower was staggering. Even the mighty human warship couldn't withstand everything. Explosions rippled across the Indomitable's hull. Armor plates shattered. Shield generators failed. More sections were breached. The damage reports came flooding in. Section 7 is gone, Hana reported. Section 8 is venting atmosphere. Section 9 is not responding. Seal everything you can, Day ordered. All hands, brace for heavy impacts. The ship shuddered under the assault. On every deck, crew members held tight as their ship was torn apart around them. In engineering, Bora watched her power readings drop as systems failed. Captain, we're losing reactor stability, she reported. We're down to 40% capacity. Falling. Day made a quick calculation. They couldn't sustain this. The ship was dying. But if they withdrew now, the coalition fleet would be destroyed. Everyone they had come to save would die. He made his decision. All power to forward shields. Strip everything else if you have to. We're going to punch through their center line. Hana looked at him in shock. Sir, if we commit to that course, we'll be surrounded. We won't be able to retreat. I know, Day said calmly. But if we break their center, they'll have to pull back to reorganize. That will give the coalition fleet time to regroup. Do it. The Indomitable changed course, driving straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Vreth ships surrounded it on all sides, pouring fire into the human vessel. The damage was catastrophic, but the Indomitable kept fighting. Its weapons never stopped firing. Even with failing systems and dead crew members, the humans refused to break. They fought with a determination that shocked their enemies and inspired their allies. Dr. Yoon's medical bay was overwhelmed. Bodies lay on every available surface. She moved from patient to patient, doing what she could, knowing it wasn't enough. Trending, a young officer died even as she tried to save him. She closed his eyes gently and moved to the next patient. In engineering, Chief Bora was literally holding systems together with improvised repairs. When power conduits failed, she rerouted through backup systems. When backup systems failed, she found alternate paths. The ship was falling apart, but she refused to let it stop working. "Chief, the port reactor is critical," one of her engineers shouted. "We need to shut it down." "No," Bora said firmly. "If we lose that reactor, we lose shields. Bypass the safety systems. Keep it running." "But Chief, it could explode." "Then it explodes. But not until we've won this fight." Lieutenant Tay was down to half his weapons. Railgun batteries were destroyed or overheated. Missile launchers were empty. The main cannon's power systems were failing, but he kept firing with everything that still worked. "Sir, we're almost out of ammunition," one of his crew reported. "Then make every shot count," Tay replied. "Target their command ships. If we're going down, we're taking their leadership with us." On the bridge, Captain Day stood with his hands behind his back, watching the tactical display. His ship was dying. His crew was dying. But they had achieved their goal. The Vreth center line was breaking. Ships were pulling back to avoid being destroyed. The coalition fleet was pressing forward, exploiting the gap. "Admiral Sithra," he said into his communication panel. Sithra's voice came back, and for the first time, Day heard emotion in it. "Captain Day, your ship can't take much more. Pull back and let us." "Negative, Admiral. Our shields are forward-facing now. If we turn around, we're dead anyway. Go. We'll hold them here." There was a long pause. Then Sithra said quietly, "It has been an honor, Captain. The honor is ours. Indomitable out." Day turned to his crew. They were watching him, waiting. Some were wounded. All were exhausted. But their eyes were steady. "We've done what we came to do," he said. "The coalition fleet will survive. The people we came to save will live. Whatever happens now, we succeeded. I'm proud of every one of you." Commander Hana stood straighter. "Orders, Captain? Keep fighting until we can't anymore." The Indomitable continued its assault. The Vreth surrounded it completely now. But the human ship fought like a wounded animal. Dangerous. Deadly. Refusing to die. Quietly. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The ship's systems failed one by one. More crew members died. But still, they fought. Then, something unexpected happened. The Vreth began to pull back. Not retreat completely, but withdraw from immediate combat. War Master Krell had seen enough. This one human ship had cost him over 200 vessels. His center line was broken. His formation was disrupted. "All ships, withdraw to regroup," he ordered. "We'll return with more forces and finish this properly." The Vreth fleet began to disengage. They pulled back, maintaining their defensive formation as they retreated from the system. The battle was over. On the Indomitable, alarm klaxons were wailing. Fires burned on multiple decks. The reactor warning lights flashed red. The ship was moments from complete failure. "Captain, we need to evacuate," Commander Hana said urgently. "The reactors are going critical." Day looked at his dying ship. For 80 years, the Indomitable had waited for this moment. Now, it had fought its first battle. And it would be its last. "Give the order," he said quietly. "Abandon ship." The evacuation alarm sounded. Crew members began moving to escape pods and shuttles. Coalition ships moved in close to assist with rescue operations. Dr. Yoon supervised the evacuation of her wounded patients, making sure everyone who could be moved was moved. Chief Bora stood in her engineering section, watching her beloved reactors spiral toward meltdown. She had kept them running through the impossible. Now, it was time to let them rest. "Come on, Chief," one of her engineers called. "We have to go." Bora took one last look around, then nodded. "Let's go." Captain Day was the last to leave the bridge. He stood for a moment, looking at the command chair he had occupied for 10 years. Then he turned and walked away. The Indomitable drifted in space, dead and broken but victorious. Its first battle had been its last, but it had saved the Coalition fleet and stopped the Vreeth advance. The legend had proven itself real. The escape pods floated in space like scattered seeds. Coalition ships moved carefully between them, collecting survivors. Captain Day watched from a rescue shuttle as the Indomitable drifted in the distance, its hull torn and broken, fires still burning in some sections. 4,000 crew members, Commander Hanna said quietly beside him. "We lost 847. Day closed his eyes briefly. 847 people who had trusted him, who had followed his orders, who had died because he chose to fight. They saved thousands," Hanna continued. "Maybe millions, if we count the colonies that would have fallen. They didn't die for nothing." "No," Day agreed, "but they still died." The rescue shuttle docked with Admiral Sithra's flagship. As Day stepped aboard, Coalition crew members stopped what they were doing and saluted. He returned the salute, uncomfortable with the attention. Sithra met him in the main corridor. The bird-like admiral looked tired, her feathers ruffled and stained with smoke, but her eyes were clear and grateful. "Captain Day," she said, "I don't have words adequate to thank you. Your ship saved us all." "My ship is destroyed," Day replied. "My crew is scattered. I disobeyed direct orders to be here. I'm not sure thanks are what I'll be receiving from my superiors." "Then your superiors are fools." Sithra gestured down the corridor. "Come. We need to plan our next moves. The Vreth will return." They gathered in the flagship's command center. Day's surviving officers joined them. Commander Hanna, Lieutenant Tay with his arm in a sling, Chief Bora with burns on her hands, and Dr. Yoon looking exhausted beyond measure. "Status report," Sithra asked her tactical officer. "The Vreeth have withdrawn beyond sensor range. We estimate they lost 230 ships in the battle. We lost 19 coalition vessels, and the Indomitable is gone." "Endable." "Community 8, Endabai." "Not gone," Bora muttered. "Just sleeping." Sithra looked at the human engineer curiously. "Can it be repaired?" "Repaired?" "No. It's too badly damaged. But rebuilt? Maybe. If we can tow it back to Earth, shipyards." Bora's expression was sad. "It'll never be the same ship, though." "What about the Vreth?" Day asked. "How many ships do they still have?" The tactical officer pulled up reconnaissance data. Long-range scans suggest their main fleet contains at least 3,000 vessels. What we fought was just their advance force. The room fell silent. 3,000 ships. The coalition had maybe 200 combat-capable vessels in total, and most of those were light cruisers never designed for heavy combat. "We can't fight that many," one of Sithra's officers said quietly. "Even with human ships, we can't win." "Earth is mobilizing," Day said. "We have 11 more dreadnoughts. They're not as large as the Indomitable, but they're powerful. And we have carriers, cruisers, destroyers. Within 2 weeks, we can field a fleet of 80 ships." 80 ships against 3,000, Sithra said. The mathematics are not favorable. No. Day agreed. But we don't need to defeat them everywhere. We need to make them believe we can. We need to make them fear us. Hana leaned forward. What are you suggesting, Captain? The Vreth don't know how many ships humanity has. They know the Indomitable hurt them badly. If we can make them think all our ships are that powerful, they'll be cautious. They'll hesitate. That hesitation buys us time. A bluff, Sithra said. You want to bluff an entire enemy fleet. It's worked so far, Tay said with a weak smile. The Indomitable was a bluff for 80 years. Everyone thought it was invincible because they never saw it fail. We just need to maintain that illusion a bit longer. Over the next few hours, they planned. Coalition shipyards would begin emergency production. Human reinforcements would spread out across multiple systems to make their fleet look larger than it was. And most importantly, they would let rumors spread about the terrible human warships that could destroy entire fleets. But Day knew the truth. They were buying time, nothing more. Eventually, the Vreth would realize humanity's fleet was not infinite. And when that happened, they would attack with everything they had. A communication came through from Earth. Admiral Ko's face appeared on the screen, and he did not look happy. Captain Day, he said formally, I have received reports of your unauthorized deployment to the combat zone. I also have reports that you disobeyed direct orders and engaged enemy forces without permission. Day stood at attention. Yes, sir. I take full responsibility for my actions. Ko's expression didn't change. Your actions resulted in the destruction of humanity's most powerful warship and the deaths of 847 crew members. Yes, sir. Your actions also saved the Coalition defense fleet and stopped the Vreth advance. Admiral Sithra has officially recommended you for the highest Coalition military honor. Earth's government wants to court-martial you. It's quite a situation. I understand, sir. Ko finally allowed himself a small smile. Personally, Captain, I think you did exactly what needed to be done. The Council can debate it later. For now, you're needed. The Vreth will return, and we need experienced officers who know how to fight them. What are your orders, Admiral? The Indomitable is being towed to Earth for evaluation. Your crew will be reassigned to other vessels. As for you, Captain Day, you'll take command of the defensive coordination. Work with Admiral Sithra. Teach the Coalition how humans fight. Because if we're going to survive this, everyone needs to learn to fight like you did. After the communication ended, Day found himself alone in the flagship's observation deck. He stared out at the stars, thinking about his ship and his fallen crew members. They're calling you a hero, a voice said behind him. He turned to see Dr. Yoon standing in the doorway. She looked as tired as he felt. I'm not a hero, he said. I'm just a captain who got his ship destroyed. You're a captain who saved thousands of lives. Yoon walked over to stand beside him. I've been treating wounded crew members all day. Do you know what they say about you? They say they'd follow you anywhere. Even the ones who are badly injured, they say they'd do it again. They shouldn't have to, Day said quietly. They trained for 80 years, fought for 6 hours, and now, most of them don't even have a ship. No, they have something better. They have proof that they were right. All those years of preparation, all that training everyone mocked them for, it mattered. It saved lives. Day considered her words. Maybe she was right. The Indomitable had been called a waste, a relic, a monument to human paranoia. But when the moment came, it had been exactly what the galaxy needed. Over the following days, the survivors of the Indomitable scattered to other ships. Lieutenant Tay took a position on the carrier Defiant, training its weapons crews in human tactics. Chief Bora went to a shipyard station to oversee the emergency production of new vessels. Dr. Yoon remained with the Coalition fleet, sharing her battlefield medicine experience with their doctors. Commander Hana stayed with Captain Day, serving as his second-in-command in the Defensive Coordination Center. Together, they worked with Admiral Sithra to reorganize the Coalition fleet. "Your ships are too spread out," Day explained to a gathering of Coalition commanders. "You fight as individuals, each ship acting independently. The Vreth fight as a swarm, overwhelming single targets. You need to operate in groups, supporting each other. Human tactics are so brutal," one commander complained. "We prefer precision strikes, minimal casualties." "That's fine when you're fighting people who share that philosophy," Hana said firmly. "The Vreth don't care about minimal casualties. They want maximum destruction. You have to meet them on those terms, or they'll destroy you." Slowly, reluctantly, the Coalition commanders began to change their thinking. They studied human battle tactics. They reorganized their fleets into battle groups. They adjusted their weapon systems for maximum damage, rather than precise targeting. It was a hard transition. Many species in the Coalition had evolved past aggressive warfare. They had built their societies on cooperation and peace. Now, humans were teaching them how to be warriors again. A week passed. Then another. Human reinforcements began arriving. Smaller than the Indomitable, but numerous. Each carried human crew members trained in the brutal efficiency of total war. Reconnaissance drones reported the Vreth were regrouping as well. Their main fleet was gathering at the edge of Coalition space, preparing for a massive assault. Intelligence estimated they would attack within 2 weeks. "We won't be ready," Sithra said, studying the reports. "Even with human reinforcements, we're still outnumbered 5-1. "Then we make them fight where we're strongest," Day replied. "We choose the battlefield. We create advantages. We make them pay for every light year they advance. And if that's not enough," Day looked at the tactical displays, showing the gathering enemy fleet. "Then, we do what the Indomitable did. We fight until we can't fight anymore. And we make them remember why they should fear humanity." Hana brought new information. "Captain, long-range sensors have detected the Vreth main fleet, beginning to move. They're heading for the Crucible Nebula. If they take that system, they'll have a direct route to the core worlds." Day studied the star charts. The Crucible Nebula. Dense gases. Sensor interference. Multiple asteroid fields. It was a defender's dream, and an attacker's nightmare. "That's where we'll make our stand," he said. "Send word to all fleet elements. We're going to the Crucible." Admiral Sithra nodded. "How many ships will we have? 70 Coalition vessels? 20 human warships? Against 800 Vreth ships. Those are terrible odds." "Yes," Day agreed. "But the Indomitable faced worse odds and held. We'll do the same." The orders went out. Ships from across Coalition space began converging on the Crucible Nebula. The largest fleet the Coalition had assembled in 300 years was gathering for the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. And leading them was a captain whose ship had been destroyed, but whose will remained unbroken. The Crucible Nebula glowed with purple and orange gases as the Coalition fleet took up positions. Captain Day stood on the bridge of the human carrier Defiant, watching the tactical displays. 90 ships against 800. The mathematics were brutal, but the terrain favored them. "All ships report ready," Commander Hana said from her station. "Coalition forces are positioned in ambush points throughout the nebula. Human ships are holding the central positions." Day nodded. They had spent 3 days preparing this battlefield. Every asteroid, every gas cloud, every sensor shadow had been mapped and used. The Vreth would not get an easy fight. Admiral Sithra's voice came through the communication system. "Captain Day, the enemy fleet has entered sensor range. They're coming in force. I'm reading over 800 vessels." "Good," Day said calmly. "The more ships they bring into the nebula, the more crowded it gets. Their numbers become a disadvantage in close quarters." Across the fleet, captains made final preparations. On the destroyer, Swift Strike, Lieutenant Tay supervised his gun crews. His arm was still healing, but he refused to stay in medical. The ship's weapons were charged and ready. In a coalition cruiser, Chief Bora worked with alien engineers to maximize their weapon output. She had spent the past week teaching them how to push their systems past normal limits. Safety margins are for peacetime, she had told them. In war, you use every bit of power you can get. Dr. Yoon was aboard a mobile medical ship at the rear of the formation. She had organized a network of medical personnel from a dozen species, creating an emergency response system that could handle mass casualties. She hoped she wouldn't need it. She knew she would. The Vreth fleet entered the nebula, confident and aggressive. War Master Krell stood in his command ship, studying the tactical displays. The humans thought they could hide in gas clouds and ambush his forces. He would show them the futility of resistance. All ships, spread out and search, he ordered. Find them and destroy them. The Vreth vessels dispersed throughout the nebula, their sensors scanning for enemies. They found coalition ships quickly. Light cruisers appeared on their sensors, apparently trying to flee. The Vreth gave chase, eager to destroy these weak targets. They were charging directly into prepared kill zones. Now, Day ordered quietly. The first Vreth ships entered a narrow passage between two massive asteroids. Coalition vessels appeared from behind the rocks, weapons firing. The narrow space prevented the Vreth from using their numerical advantage. They could only fight with the few ships that fit through the passage. Railgun rounds and energy beams tore through Vreth hulls. Trapped in the passage, the enemy ships couldn't retreat without colliding with vessels behind them. They died one after another, unable to use their superior numbers. Throughout the nebula, similar ambushes sprang to life. Coalition forces struck from concealment, inflicted heavy damage, then withdrew before the Vreth could respond in force. It was guerrilla warfare on a massive scale. War Master Krell watched his ships die and realized he had made a mistake. The humans had turned the nebula into a trap. His superior numbers meant nothing when he could only fight with a few ships at a time. All vessels, converge on Sector 7, he ordered. We'll concentrate our forces and push through their defenses together. The Vreth fleet began to consolidate, gathering into a massive formation. Hundreds of ships moved together, their combined firepower overwhelming. They pushed toward the center of the nebula, where sensors indicated the largest concentration of enemy vessels. They're adapting, Hana reported today, consolidating their fleet and advancing as one unit. Expected, Day replied. Phase 2. Have all coalition ships fall back to the central defense line. We'll meet them head-on. The coalition ships withdrew from their ambush positions, gathering in a defensive formation in the heart of the nebula. The Vreth advanced toward them like a tidal wave of metal and weapons. The two fleets met in the densest part of the nebula. Sensor interference was so heavy that ships could barely see beyond a few thousand kilometers. It became a close-range brawl, brutal and chaotic. The Defiant fired its main batteries into the approaching Vreth ships. Beside it, coalition cruisers added their weapons. But the enemy kept coming, absorbing losses and pushing forward through sheer numbers. They're not stopping, Hana said, watching the tactical display. Sir, they're going to overrun us. Not yet, Day said. Trigger the asteroids. Throughout the battle zone, charges that had been placed on asteroids over the past 3 days detonated. Massive rocks broke apart, sending thousands of smaller fragments flying through space at high velocity. The Vreth formation, packed tightly together for mutual support, found themselves in a deadly storm of debris. Ships collided with asteroids. Hulls were breached by high-speed rocks. The tight formation became a liability as vessels crashed into each other trying to avoid the fragments. But still the Vreth advanced. They were taking terrible losses, but there were so many of them. For every ship destroyed, 2 more pressed forward. On the swift strike, Lieutenant Tay's gun crews fired until their weapons overheated. He watched enemy ships bearing down on his position and knew they couldn't stop them all. "All power to forward shields," he ordered. His crew looked at him in shock. "Sir, if we ram them, we'll take one more enemy with us," Tay interrupted. "Better than dying for nothing." The swift strike accelerated directly at a Vreth capital ship. At the last moment, Tay fired every remaining weapon. The Vreth ship's shields collapsed under the barrage. The swift strike slammed into its hull at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Coalition ships fought with desperate courage, taking enemies with them as they died. The humans had taught them that if you were going to fall, you fell fighting. On the Defiant, damage reports flooded in. They were losing ships faster than the Vreth, even with the ambushes and terrain advantages. The mathematics were catching up with them. "Captain, we can't sustain this," Hana said. "We need to withdraw." Day studied the tactical display, his mind racing through options. They needed something to break the Vreth momentum. Something to make the enemy hesitate. Then he saw it. War Master Krell's command ship was pushing toward the center of the battle, directing the Vreth assault. If that ship fell, the enemy fleet would lose coordination. But it was protected by dozens of escorts and heavy armor. "All human ships, this is Captain Day," he broadcast. "Concentrate all fire on the enemy command ship. Authorization code: Indomitable." Every human vessel heard that code and understood. It was the tactic the Indomitable had used in its final moments. Total commitment. No retreat. Victory. Or death. 20 human warships turned toward the Vreth command ship. They pushed through enemy formations, taking massive damage but never stopping. Their weapons fired continuously at a single target. Chief Bora, aboard the cruiser Relentless, pushed the ship's reactors past safety limits. "I don't care if they explode," she shouted at her crew. "Give me everything you've got." The Relentless's weapons fired with power that should have been impossible. Beside it, other human ships did the same, pushing their systems to destruction to maintain firepower. The combined assault hammered War Master Krell's command ship. Its shields flickered and failed. Armor began to break apart. The Vreth leader watched his displays in disbelief. How could so few ships generate such firepower? "All escorts, protect the command ship," he ordered. But the human vessels wouldn't be stopped. They fought through the escorts like demons, absorbing punishment that would have destroyed normal ships. Human engineering, human determination, and human sacrifice all combined into an unstoppable force. The Defiant took a direct hit that destroyed half its forward sections. Day held onto his command chair as the ship shook. Around him, crew members fought to keep systems operational. "Sir, we've lost main weapons," Hana reported. "Life support is failing in sections 2 through 6. "Keep us moving," Day ordered. "We're almost there." The human ships closed to point-blank range with Krell's command vessel. They fired everything they had: railguns, missiles, energy weapons. Even a few ships rammed escort vessels to clear a path. And finally, through the combined effort of ships fighting beyond their limits, the Vreth command ship's defenses broke. A human destroyer fired its last missile straight into the command bridge. War Master Krell saw the missile coming. Then the command ship exploded. The Vreth fleet, suddenly leaderless, faltered. Ships stopped coordinating. Some tried to retreat. Others continued fighting without direction. The tight formation collapsed into chaos. "All coalition ships, advance," Admiral Sithra ordered. "Push them back." The coalition fleet surged forward. Ships that had been barely holding now attacked with renewed energy. The Vreth began to retreat, their advance broken. But the cost had been terrible. Of the 90 ships that had defended the nebula, only 34 remained combat-capable. The human fleet had lost 15 of its 20 vessels. On the Defiant, alarms wailed throughout the ship. The reactor was going critical. Day gave the order he had given once before. Abandon ship, all hands to escape pods. As crew members evacuated, Day and Hana stood on the damaged bridge. They had won, but the victory felt hollow with so many dead. Did we do the right thing? Hana asked quietly. Day looked at the tactical display, showing the retreating Vreth fleet. We did what was necessary. Whether it was right, history will judge. They evacuated with the last of the crew. The Defiant drifted in space, another human ship sacrificed to protect the galaxy. The Battle of the Crucible Nebula was over. The Vreth had retreated. Their expansion stopped, but they were not destroyed. They would rebuild, regroup, and possibly return. But the coalition had learned something important. They had learned to fight. They had learned that sometimes peace must be defended with war, and they had learned that humanity, the species they had once dismissed as paranoid and outdated, understood something they had forgotten. 3 months later, a memorial was held on Earth. Names of the fallen were read aloud. Captain Day stood with other survivors, listening to the names of friends and crew members who had died in the battles. Among the names were Lieutenant Tay, who had rammed his ship into an enemy vessel, 847 crew members of the Indomitable, and thousands more from coalition ships who had learned to fight and die like humans. A monument was unveiled. It showed the Indomitable in its glory, before the battle that had destroyed it. An inscription read, "This warship was a legend until it showed up in battle. Then it became something greater. Proof that some legends are real, and that the price of peace is eternal vigilance." Commander Hana, now promoted to captain, stood beside Day. She had been given command of humanity's newest dreadnought, still under construction. "What will you name it?" Day asked. "Indomitable 2, she replied. So the legend continues. Behind them, shipyards worked day and night. The galaxy had been awakened to the reality of war. The coalition was building ships, training crews, and preparing defenses. They would not be caught unprepared again. And leading them were humans, the species who had never forgotten that peace was not the absence of warriors but the choice warriors made not to fight. And when fighting became necessary, they remembered how to do it better than anyone else. Far away, in dark space, the Vreth Dominion licked its wounds and planned its next move. But now, they knew fear. They had faced humans in battle and learned what the rest of the galaxy was discovering. Humanity had prepared for the worst. And when the worst came, humanity was ready. The Indomitable was gone, but its spirit lived on in every human ship, in every trained crew member, in every defensive position. The legend had proven itself real, and in doing so, had saved the galaxy. Some legends exist only in stories. But some legends stand and fight when the galaxy needs them most. The Indomitable had been both, and its story would be told for generations. A reminder that hope for the best requires preparation for the worst, and that when darkness comes, someone must stand in the light. Humanity had proven they were those warriors.